Hi everybody, it's December 9th, 2025, and this is my latest installment of my video journal of my recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Kierans, 64, with Down syndrome, be isolated and locked up by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby as leader, for 588 days before he had a stroke and died. So today is my 70th birthday. And in our family, we have a tradition where my parents would recount the circumstances of the birth. There was 9 children in my family, and my parents would recount the circumstances of the birth of that person. So in my case, it was very exciting. After the 5th child, my mother was diagnosed with Rh factor or rhesus factor, which is when the mother's blood type is Rh negative, and the child's blood type is Rh positive. And so after the first pregnancy, the mother's antibodies start to pass across the placental barrier between the fetus and the mother. And my sister, Mary Patricia, who would have been 4 years older than me, was stillborn, full-term stillborn. And my brother Harry, God rest his soul, was born 3 months premature. And I was brought on a month premature, so I should have been born in 1956, but I was born in 1955. And my father was in the labor room or whatever at Women's Hospital. So my mother had to travel from Sudbury down to Toronto for every pregnancy, and she was under strict supervision because they didn't have any treatment for Rh factor then. And my father was so afraid that I was going to be stillborn as well. He was in the labor room, and he said, I was born blue-black, I looked dead, I was floppy, I didn't cry. And he begged the medical staff to try and revive me. So they rushed me. There's a secret passageway from Women's Hospital in Toronto to sick kids. And my dad said they rushed me through the secret passageway into sick kids, where I went into the intensive care nursery, and they gave me a needle and 6 blood transfusions. So my blood was replaced 6 times. And my father said that he could see I was black, and he could see me start to turn pink from the top of my head slowly down to the tips of my toes. And then my toes started wiggling. And so ever since that day, his nickname for me until he passed away in 2013 at the age of 101, almost 101, was Twinkle Toes. My father also called me, he's the only human being that was ever allowed to call me Kathy. And so when somebody accidentally calls me Kathy to this day, I'm now 70, I like to think that it's my dad saying hi from heaven. So I've walked you through this journey of watching my little brother Paul Kierans, who was born with Rh factor and with Down syndrome. And we grew up together. He was 2.5 years younger than me. I became a psychologist for the government of British Columbia, working with people with Down syndrome. at a large institution. I was hired specifically to deal with a 35-year-old man who was nonverbal with Down syndrome and who was engaged in self-injurious behavior, headbanging. So any chance he got, he would get down on the floor and smash his head open. I guess there's not a better way to put it. And so he had a huge scar on his forehead. And they were at their wits' end. They didn't know what to do. He was in a hockey helmet with a safety snap, full restraint, full body restraint, 24/7. Like if for 1 second he got free, he would get down on the floor and bang his head open. And the cause of that is self-stimulation. It's also a form of communication. So I did research of the scientific literature, and uniformly they said it's a form of communication. Either escape, like get me out of here, or look at me. And then it has the pain of banging their head creates endogenous endorphins or opioids in the brain that's self-reinforcing. So they want to feel that opioid rush again, and that's why they do the head banging. Anyway, so I spent 6 months teaching this man to sign, eat, drink, his name, my name, hug, stop, more. But once he learned the first word, he stopped banging his head. And the last time I saw him was when I was working as a lawyer for the government of Canada. I was a federal prosecutor in 1992. And he came into the food court at the Royal Centre in downtown Vancouver with his caregiver, with no restraints, no helmet, nothing. And he recognized me and he gave me a big hug. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of that I've achieved, excuse me, in my whole life. But with Paul, as I've tried to explain, what happened was I discovered that the government of BC created power of attorney over Paul, appointing my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister as in 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario as Paul's guardian, so they could give him the COVID-19 shot. They didn't tell anybody else. But at the time, Paul had 6 surviving siblings. Didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell me. And when I found out about it, because they also confined him for the COVID. They said that there was a COVID outbreak in his group home. And so I started a court action to become his guardian. I didn't even know that this document existed. And when I found out about it, I complained to the Burnaby RCMP because I could see that it was a fraud and a forgery, in my opinion. I taught Paul to print the only word that he could ever print. That was his first name, Paul. That was the only word he could read or print. And the signature didn't look like, I had hundreds of samples of his signature, and the signature on the document, which was witnessed by low-level group home caregivers, didn't look anything like his signature. It was almost perfect. And Paul's signature was always wrong in a multitude of different ways, with the letters being backwards or upside down or in the wrong order or repetitive. But I knew that it was his signature because he was my brother. So 3 days after I complained to the police, the group home terminated our visits permanently after our visiting at will at that point for 64 years. And I did everything I could do legally to try and restore our visits. He begged for me to visit him. They eventually relented and let us have a 10-minute telephone call once a week. These people are really evil. I mean, when you want to talk about what's evil in this world, that's a sample of it. And and Paul's separation from me is a miscarriage of justice. His confinement and isolation as a completely innocent person in the care of the state was one of the worst miscarriages of justice in Canadian history, in my opinion. And when my sister found out that the oversight agency for the RCMP had ordered them to reopen the investigation, she found out in March of 2024, she applied to court to have me declared a vexatious litigant, which is a very rare and unusual designation. It's almost never granted, which completely takes away the person's right to the access. You have a dispute with someone, you've got access to the courts of Canada. Even those ostriches, the 300 ostriches, had access to the courts of Canada. But my sister vigorously pursued. She had 2 law firms working for her, paid for by the Catholic Church, of which I'm a member. Round the clock, I estimate that they spent $1.5 million on these lawyers. And Paul died. He had a stroke and died on April 23rd of 2024, but she still kept on coming. And she came out to Vancouver for 4 days for a 4-day hearing where I was designated a vexatious litigant and lost my access to the courts of Canada that every human being, I think even a river in Quebec had access to the courts of Canada. So I'd like to think that this horrible, heartbreaking journey that I've been on is for a reason, and that I survived as a newborn, and that I was the first single mother in history to graduate from law school in British Columbia. In history, there was a single dad at the same time, John Davies High, though we went to UBC Law School together. But I'm the first single mother in history to have graduated from law school. And I believe it's all sort of culminated in me on this journey where I can advocate for the rights of disabled and vulnerable people like my brother and myself. I'm legally a disabled person as a result of an accident, and I also have a heart condition and lupus. So anyways, I believe that this journey, as terrible as it is, we're now at the Supreme Court of Canada. I'm applying to set aside this permanent lifelong designation as a vexatious litigant, which was obtained in my submissions improperly. I have a potentially life-threatening cardiac condition. I told the judge at the hearing that by doctor's order, written order, I'm not allowed to be in court for longer than 2 hours per day. And she went on for the 2.5 hours on the first day and then for 2 full days thereafter. My materials were not filed before the court, although the nun spent all this money on the millions of dollars on this case. My responding materials, which they're required to file before the judge, were not filed. So the judge didn't have my materials before her when I was there. So on September 3rd, all of my materials for my appeal were filed with the Supreme Court of Canada for my application for permission to appeal, as this being a case of national importance, which I believe that it is. My right to life, liberty, and security of the person was denied by the judge hearing this case, as I couldn't be there. I couldn't represent myself, and there was no lawyer there representing me. So that's it for today. I'm so thrilled to have reached this milestone birthday of 70. I never thought I'd get here, but here I am. And I hope that I can help change the law for the better for disabled people in Canada. Thank you, everybody. The last time I checked, I had 188 birthday wishes. Please contribute if you can. Please contribute whatever you can afford to my GoFundMe account, there's going to be expenses. As I said, my sister has spent $1.5 million paid for by the Catholic Church, and I've paid my own way. I borrowed money, and I'm trying to raise money for the filing fees for the Supreme Court of Canada. So anything that you can kick in would be so appreciated. It helps me believe in myself and in this cause. Take care, everybody. I love you all.